This may reduce his ability to mate with the proper.
Alright, good afternoon, Earth. Got the wood split up just in time for the rainstorm to come in, it looks like. I'm gonna need to let my cat in. It's about to get nasty outside, I think. And I'm editing an Owsley Stanley interview right now as well, so I might need to stop to go cut out the ads when they show up. But for the moment, I'm going to finish doing the block filling for the figures on the start of this painting Ferris wheel. I'm just going to use the same blues that I was using earlier in this painting, a Pumpkin Patch Party, and colorize the figures in the gondolas of the Ferris wheel, real simple blues and a light purple, and then maybe start populating the lower portion of the ground that can still be seen from a top-down perspective of some figures wandering around the fairground. So here we go.
Is the creation of this mind, according to the rules, which are the laws of nature, the rules of physics, the rules, which are the pollen, the laws that stick to him. And he attempts to mate. So I've seen films of the male getting on with the flower. And he leaves that flower and goes to another one, tries again. And he leaves the pollen that he picked up from the first one, picks up a pair from that one. And he might go on, he might actually hump a dozen flowers in turn, right? Yeah. This may reduce his ability to mate with the proper female of his species, but it pollinates the flower, does the flower thing. And yet, flowers have no eyes. Orchids have no eyes. To imitate the female, the plant has to know what it looks like. So the plant knows what it looks like. Not only does it know what it looks like, it has to understand the practices that animal undergoes in order to put itself in there to take advantage of that.
Well, I think you're construing consciousness rather broadly here.
Of course. Why should you restrict the definition of consciousness?
Okay.
Well,
I'm open to this.
My experiences with plants through psychedelics lead me to believe that it's an extension of my alchemical belief. Alchemy, the basic tenet of alchemy is that the universe is mental, that there's a being which is nothing but mind, pure mind. And that all that we experience is the creation of this mind, according to the rules, which are the laws of nature, the rules of physics, the rules of chemistry, so forth, attraction, repulsion, polarity, all these things it's still mental. And since everything in the universe is mental, because it is the mentation of the being which is mental, everything has to use the same kind of mentality. In other words, all consciousness relates, and it's the same. So there shouldn't be any trouble being able to communicate mentally with any other living thing, whether it be another man, a dog, a plant, or anything else, because all thought has to be of the same nature, because it's all manifested by it. The way in which we manipulate sound waves in our language, the way in which we put this language together is more expressive of us and of our culture. As we're beginning to understand, other animals use sound to communicate with in much more complicated fashions than we had previously thought. Dolphins, for instance, and even monkeys, and perhaps even other animals. There's always been people like Indians who would say that they could talk to the animals, that they knew what the animal was saying and it made a certain noise, that different sounds and different movements and positions and so forth can be used to communicate. Certainly they've been very successful in teaching American Sign Language to chimpanzees. Mm-hmm. So I see no reason why one should doubt that behind that all is the common modality of thought.
So we work on a continuum then, from rocks to gods.
Yeah, which is why I think people are attracted to crystals. Because the crystalline substance has a highly ordered electronic behavior. And the behavior of thought and mentation has electronic nature to it. There's a flow of electrons. And in fact, one of the very interesting things, this is very interesting too, as a little aside, about how psychedelics affect you and how you interact with not only consciousness, but we found that some of the psychedelics seem to affect our ability to interact with inanimate equipment.
Really?
Specifically, when someone at a show or when in a room where someone was playing music was to take some DMT, which is a rather powerful psychedelic, the music would immediately become louder and more strident. And
Really? The other people would notice that?
absolutely, everybody. Oh, everybody. It just does a thing, and it has a certain tonality to it, a certain quality to it, which is very distinctive. So we none of us could, we generally could all do it, right? We thought, oh, well, that's just one of those things. But then I got on back to that thing that I learned from Melissa, is that don't assume that this is an illusion caused by the substance.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it's real. So I said, hey, I believe this is real. Well, one thing we noticed was that the tubes would get red hot and burn out half the time, and it would tear the voice calls out of the speakers. And yet we couldn't make it do that ordinarily. So I actually started making some measurements. We measure the amplifier at its maximum output with a musician doing everything he could to get the max out of it. Then somebody would smoke the DMT, but not everybody, just one person.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd measure it, and it would go up 6 dB, which is
That's so fast, quadruple power, right?
right. It would go up more than that sometimes. And yet we were absolutely sure we were at the limit. It would be something like 127 max. Somebody would smoke it and go to 132. And it would literally melt the voice coils. Where did the power come from? The tubes couldn't handle it. They would often burn up. They'd often get hot, and the internal structures of the tubes would melt. Where did it come from? Right? What was going on? I evolved a little theory. I don't know, because obviously this is something that you could do some scientific research on. It would be well worthy of it. The idea being that if you could find, if there was some type of circuit that was more sensitive to it than others, you could measure different circuit sensitivity, then you could optimize that. And perhaps you might even be able to develop a circuit that had that property to such an extent that a person could effect it without having to take the psychedelic. And it wouldn't matter what, any interaction of any kind that you could initiate with your mind would enable you to build something that would directly control a machine. Because the computer could interpret it anything.
Mm-hmm.
That once you could get into it that way, you see, which is what we need. We need a way of controlling machines directly. I mean, so it's like an example of many of the opportunities that psychedelics present to man, which are being completely thrown away because of the irrational approach that people are taking to them. This is real. The amplifier changes, the sound changes, the music also changes. So whether that's a psychic effect on the amplifier, on the musician, I don't know. But no matter what effect person A's taking the psychedelic could have on person B who's playing the guitar, there's no way that person B could make that guitar get louder by himself.
Mm-hmm.
The guitar, everything got louder, everything got stronger, it became more strident, it changed in quality, but it also became much louder.
Well,
That came from a direct effect on maybe the electrons flowing in the equipment, which is the thing about the organization of electrons and the similarity or the very close association of the quality of consciousness or thought to electronic motion and matter. Because certainly the most elaborately constrained electron would be the one that's associated with DNA, which is billions of atoms sometimes, an enormous number of atoms, all of which arranged in a very precise way would order the motion of electrons in a very, very precise and specific and special
Which
way.
would have frequency and resonances and stuff that we...
I don't know, because you see, I'm not a scientist.
No, but if you take your guys' stuff so below, then we assume that there would be ripples and harmonics of that all the way up into perceivable realms. Right?
Probably, yeah.
Did you play
certainly,
music?
sometimes you tell it to be. Actually involved.
One moment.
Picked a great time to run over the headset with my chair. It's Dead to the World. My name is David Gads, and you're listening to an interview. Yeah,
Which
I think
is
so.
billions of atoms, sometimes, an enormous number of atoms, all
Picked a great time to run over the headset with my chair. It's Dead to the World. My name is David Gads, and you're listening to an interview.
it just
Did many world and bear a great hero to many of us in the music world and the psychedelic hippie world and the world of audio, because he did many good things for all of us spiritually and materially and in the world of audio. I'm just going to go on. I'll tell you a little bit more after this. Let's listen to another segment to get us through the top of the hour. Did you like the music when you first heard the Grateful Dead in your You like the music when you first heard the Grateful Dead in your
that scared me.
How so?
It just seemed frightening.
All right. I had to cut out that little segment right there. Well, it's just kind of annoying, and I don't need another introduction after the introduction is already, just because that got back to chair over his headphones. But fascinating interview. I love this guy's observation about the orchids having no eyes and yet understanding the way the bee looks enough to emulate it. That's a pretty fascinating observation that kind of fits in nicely with the Rupert Sheldrake stuff I've been re-editing. This guy's a pretty fascinating character. I've never heard of him until recently, and I guess he died a couple of weeks ago, or whenever this interview was taken. I didn't pay attention to the date when I fired it up, but interesting stuff. So I'm going to finish up blocking in the purple and then shade with a little blue. Here we go.
Some kind of a cap that would make the connection available to be plugged into something. A psychic cable.
For the insulation?
Yeah, you might say. Right.
No, you're
Like a hymen, perhaps. Mental hymen. And then the connection would be made, and all the people would be linked up and start sharing thoughts and images and ideas. And it was like not just thoughts, but little thoughts and concepts. But you saw like a patchwork of images, and you felt a patchwork of body sensations and everything else. It was very definitely a gestalt, multiple mind kind of phenomenon.
polymorphous synesthesia.
Could be. Yeah, that might be a good term. That would certainly describe it.
Do you think, well, obviously other people felt this too.
But that was the first time anything like that had actually happened to me. It was very weird and scary.
Was that what those guys were working on, do you think? I mean, do you think that
Nobody would talk about it.
they just did it?
Did it. You didn't talk about it. You just did it. Whatever you had done, whatever was going on in that scene for a year or two before I ran into it, they slowly but surely built this up. And whether it was instinctive or what, it may be very well be instinctive. Maybe that the psychedelics, all of the psychedelic plants, seem to have a very ancient and direct relationship with man. As I was attempting to get into that, the cannabis plant seems to specifically produce its resin to intoxicate man in a pleasant fashion, so that the man is now interested in the plant. So just as the orchid duplicates the female bee, that particular orchid, to achieve its propagation of its kind, this plant has latched on to producing a substance that is so pleasant for the man that he will care for the plant, propagate it, etc., etc., etc. And in fact, its association with man is so strong that the Chinese symbol for pot shows a house with a plant growing into the eave. And it's considered a compost or compost heap grower everywhere, and it grows best where it's richest and well supplied with it. And when it grows off as a weed in the woods, it's never particularly potent. And if it's derived, for instance, all the Mexican stuff and some of the Mexican pot, big sativa plant, right, really can grow really tall, 16, 20 feet, grows in the same style as the hemp that's grown for fiber. Obviously, it's derived from the early hemp plantations established in Mexico by the Spanish settlers. Because you got to have hemp, because it makes rope, it makes twine, it makes cloth. Your ships have got to have it. So one of the first things that any colonial group, in fact, I wouldn't have been surprised, I don't know this to be true for a fact, but it wouldn't have surprised me if hemp seeds and stuff weren't always carried on ships for that reason, because suppose you got shipwrecked. You at least had a chance of making to yourself some rope if you could, you had the chance if you had the hemp seed. So hemp at least was a very early cultivar, wherever. And it just went on off into the woods with the Indians, and over the last 400 years or so, they simply selected it to do what they wanted. And it happens that what they wanted was to get very stoned. So the grass is extremely strong. And it's funny because it's the nature of the high is such that if the seeds are allowed to go for several years before they're planted, they become weaker and weaker and weaker. Even though it'll still grow a plant, in the end you wind up back with a plant that doesn't do anything.
Really?
Yeah.
If the seeds are kept high and dry long enough, they'll lose their...
They lose their heart. Yeah, they lose the heart. They lose the psychedelic effect. They'll still grow a plant. The plant looks the same, does everything it's supposed to do. Tends to become hermaphrodite. Hermaphrodite, I think, was the original form of the plant. The separation of male and female is something that man has imposed on it. And the exemplification of the psychedelic properties of the intoxicating resin is something man selects for. And the plant knows. The plant is conscious of the man. And it's very interesting because old-time growers, even though they grow different kinds of strains, they have a lot of different strains that they grow, very similar high.
They're all different.
Across.
Everything
that they grow. You can tell after a while. You can smoke a pot from a long-time grower and tell who it is. It becomes very distinctive. Because the plant is doing something for the guy who's caring for it. It's just a very, very tight relationship. And this relationship must also exist between man and the cactus, between man and the fungus. All the plants which we know, the shamanistic plants, which are plants with psychedelic properties, all, I believe, do it to get the man high, not as a protection against something. Because there's other things besides man that eat peyote. There's a lot of insects that eat them up. There's lots of things that eat up pot plants. Lots of things eat up mushrooms. Even deadly poisonous mushrooms are eaten quite frequently by insects and things. So any specific so-called defense seems to be an illusion. It has not necessarily that function. Just because there's a substance in there, that doesn't mean. For instance, psilocybin mushrooms are not particularly deadly to anything that eat them, right? And in fact, some animals seek them out after they've eaten them the first time. So they certainly wouldn't be. There's a lot of animals that seek them out
because they get high from
Yeah,
it.
because they get high from them.
Well,
and getting high on psychedelic is not something that just man's attracted to. It's one of the things this book points out. There's lots of animals. Almost all animals, when exposed to a consciousness-changing substance, will seek it.
That's right.
You're listening to an interview recorded in January of 1991 with the late, great Owsley Stanley. And you're listening to it on KPFA 94.1 Berkeley, 89.3 KPFB Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF 4.1 Berkeley, 89. Stanley. And you're listening to it. You recorded
Consciousness-changing substance will seek it.
That's right.
You're listening. You're listening to an interview recorded in January of 1991 with the late, great Owsley Stanley. And you're listening to it on KPFA 94.1 Berkeley, 89.3 KPFB Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF Fresno, or online at kpfa.org. The name of the program is Dead to the World, and it will continue after this pre-recorded announcement.
Golden Gate University is proud to host a benefit featuring California Senator Mark Leno and Assemblywoman Speaker Pro Tempore Fiona Ma at Dignity in Schools Beyond the Numbers of the School-to-Prison Pipeline, Community Conversations. California faces a crisis of students not completing high school, and a large portion of students who do not finish high school will end up incarcerated. The California Dropout Research Project found that a 50% reduction in dropouts statewide could save $12 billion annually. In an effort to develop community solutions to combat the systemic problems of the large school-to-prison pipeline, California Senator Leno will meet with Bay Area students, parents, and community members on Saturday, April 16th, 9 a.m. to 12 noon at Golden Gate University, 536 Mission Street in San Francisco. Donations will be accepted at the event. For questions, please call 1-800-448-4968.
And once again, I'll tell you, you are tuned to KPFA or KPFB in Berkeley or 88.1 KFCF in Fresno or online at kpfa.org. My name is David Gans. The program is Dead to the World. It is ordinarily a music program, but tonight we are listening to an interview with a true legend of American Earth People culture. Owsley Stanley, also known as Bear. He's the namesake of Bear's Choice, an album of Grateful Dead music. He recorded the Grateful Dead because he started with the Grateful Dead. He wound up being also able to hear, toured with in the crew, and guy just had a here again. Where he did go, I consider it a great personal loss. I knew him great wisdom to people. Dead moved to several theaters here on the Bay Street scene in Locust Street on foot 20 in 3484. I won't document his movie back. Walnut Creek, the Ashkenaz happened April 6th at the Hop Christ Scientific Coast.
Push me to the edge.
Family recorded on in January of 1991.
We were.
Okay, so I guess he may have died recently, but this is an old interview. I'm getting it together. Okay.
Bear Beach.
Well, let's just cutting that out.
These guys are fantastic.
Alright, I'm thinking I'm going to do a...
Push me to
We
the
got
edge.
6 minutes left on this tape.
The sound of
Alright, I might be able to throw some figures in 6 minutes.
The claws of the
But then again,
It was like they were
kind of like to give them a little shadow and a little detail, maybe do a little work on the structure of the Ferris wheel itself.
very, very.
To let it all set up before I start digging into detail. Alright, I think I'm going to do a second session, so take 2 coming up.
Greater than the Beatles.
Take 2.
It wasn't as though I just thought that. It was almost like a revelation, like looking into the future. I just instinctively knew that there was something
They were going to
like
make
that.
a big time.
Yeah, that was like, not even that I actually thought about it in those terms, but I did think these guys are going to be greater than the Beatles.
It made us that.
That was the way the thought. That was the way I recognized the thought I was having about it. I mean, that was the terms in which I sub-vocalized that to myself. And in a way, they are, because the Beatles were a phenomenon that was the phenomenon of the universal attractiveness of their music and the intense teenage involvement. You find that intense teenage involvement in dozens of different bands, and you find excellent musical output in dozens of different bands. They create a lot of fans. They have not created the kind of thing that's associated with the culture. It's different. It's a totally different thing. It's so different that there's a university professor in North Carolina that is studying them as a specific cultural phenomenon.
Yeah. So what did you do with that?
I did well, I went on, they played for a while, and then they did it, they played again, and all these other things were going on, and then there was this one paranoid little sucker in there, and he thought something, and I picked up his thought, because we were all linked together. It was this total telepathic loop, which meant that it was like being at a very noisy cocktail party inside your head. And this guy saw somebody come into the place that he thought was a narc. He thought narcs. I thought narcs, and I went right out the side door. I was gone. So I
Because
just,
it wasn't illegal yet, was it?
there was all kinds of drugs going on there. It didn't matter. It was just this guy's paranoia came. You know, my party line, and out of it. So I mean, I wasn't even. I don't think I was in the thing about me pushing the chair around was maybe 10 or 15 minutes.
Just somebody else's
And I saw one set of Grateful Dead, and some other stuff, and I was gone. I was out. I was running up the road.
But you went to see them again.
Oh yeah, but it was a while. That was so freaky. That whole trip was so freaky that I thought they were messing with something that was probably very dangerous. Is what I thought. It's not so good.
Well, wait, not so good? They were going to be bigger than the Beatles. This is not so
That
good.
was them. That was me standing in the room listening to them play their set.
Uh-huh.
I thought that, right? But then all the rest of then I went on a cosmic trip in other chambers of the universe and for the rest of that night, and then the next day or a few days later, I talked to Keisha. I said, "Hey, you're messing with stuff from ancient stuff, right? This is without any maps. This maybe need to be careful of this." It was kind of scary. He kind of laughed at me. Well, it's sort of like the guy that gets on a roller coaster for the first time. Supposing some guy was a Yanomami Indian or something, right? He comes out of the forest, and the first thing he does, somebody puts him on a roller coaster, right? He's never even seen civilization, somebody puts him on a roller coaster.
Right. He's going to go back and say, boy, civilization.
No, no. What it is that he'll get off that thing and say that's very dangerous, that's scary, right?
Oh, I see.
And yet other people go around and around again and again and again.
Wait,
They're familiar with
you
it.
were taking acid a lot.
I think
So it wasn't the acid that was the scary part. It was the Grateful Dead that was the
No, it
scary
wasn't the Grateful Dead.
part.
It had to do with the
The
Grateful Dead.
linkage was the scary part.
Yeah, the prankster thing. The prankster thing, right? Which
The refined.
Yeah, which the Grateful Dead were part of. I mean, Grateful Dead were pranksters.
Right.
They were musicians, they were also pranksters. It was like, the next time I saw them was at the Fillmore acid test, and I met Phil, and I walked over to him and I said, "I'd like to work for you guys," because I had decided that this was the most amazing thing I'd ever run into. He says, "Oh," he says, "we don't have a manager." I said, "I don't want to be a manager." He said, "Well, we don't have a sound man." I said, "Well, I don't know anything about that either, but I guess I could probably learn. Sounds like more fun." And that's how that happened. And for a long time, it was like, no matter whatever else we were doing, we had to be at the acid test every week. That was it. That part of it is totally committed part of it. No matter what other shows we did or anything else Saturday night, we were there.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, I don't know how many of those I would have gone to. I didn't actually think of myself as a prankster per se. I found it all kind of scary, and I found it all, every time, it provided days and days and days of sorting it out, putting it together, trying to get it together. It was sort of like a crash course in how to become a jet pilot when you had never seen a jet before. The way they did it was they dropped you in there, took you up and said, "The controls are yours!" Whoa! Barrel rolls, implements, tail spins right into the ground sometimes. And but psychically, you covered all those. I guess if you're tough, and I guess most of us were. Occasionally, some people weren't. It's unfortunate, but because of the way in which it was undertaken in those days, and the fact that we used to take huge amounts of acid. We used to take 250, 300 mics or more. Kesey preferred 400 or more. And Albert Hoffman told me that was a substantial overdose. I said, yes, in retrospect, we realized it was. But
What do you consider an optimum dose?
I don't know. People nowadays seem to take around 100 or 150, something like that. All I know is that the result is that people, it's like first you have training wheels on your bike before you get the 1,000cc Yamaha, it's a little different. The fact and the result is that the people don't get so crazy, I guess. But in those days, everybody got kind of crazy, and some people crash landed, and other people managed to make it further down the road. But the whole scene became very, very, very loud and very weird. It attracted a lot of attention. It attracted a lot of social concern because a lot of people were experimenting with radically different social matrices, which were frightening to our cultural leaders and societal leaders. The police, the legislatures, and all the people who, the business community, basically the people who were concerned with maintaining a stable society, saw this as a very threatening and frightening phenomenon, with a lot of people acting very weird, doing things that just didn't fit. And they passed a lot of laws against it and tried to suppress it in various ways. Whether or not the psychedelics would have been included in the basic matrix of anti-drug laws or not, without the heavy influence of some people like Art Linkletter, I doubt. He was very...
that myth about his daughter.
Yeah.
Well, she did throw herself out a window, but, it was very convenient.
She was not on it, but just the fact that she had been taking it.
Right.
Was enough.
You're right.
Somewhere in the past, before she did it, she had taken it.
No, there were a lot of bogus stories.
Several other
There was
people
the
did things
people
like
went
that.
blind staring at the sun stories. I remember those, right? Santa Barbara, 1966. I do remember all
One was
that.
film damage.
Yeah, see, there were
Turns out
scientists
coffee
ready to cough up all this crap
Yeah.
to suit the political agenda. Well, we still see that.
But
I
some
don't
people
think-
do. The thing about crashing little walls, right?
Mhm.
Sure, we were taking large doses because that's what we thought was the right amount. And some people were psychically crashing into walls. And when nobody knew about it. We didn't come with a shaman with a 1,000 years or 10,000 years or 100,000 years of traditions and a ring of people holding your hand to show you the right way to go. It's not something that you started at puberty with. It's something all of a sudden, bang, you're shot from a cannon. And some people had a little problem with it. And so some people did themselves in when they weren't on it. Some people accidentally died when they were on it. Some people, I can't justify that stuff. I didn't know any more than anyone else, right? All I knew was that it was better to take a known substance in a known quantity than an unknown mixture of who knows what at God knows what quantity. That was the only difference. And as far as I was concerned, I didn't advocate. I didn't tell anybody about to take it, or anything else. But I knew I wanted to. I knew it was important to me. And it was important. I didn't want to poison myself. I didn't like Russian roulette with chemicals. And I didn't think it was appropriate.
So I would say then that what you were doing was essentially taking responsibility for it.
Yeah.
For yourself and for the people that you were experimenting with.
Yeah.
Your partners.
You might say. It's one way of looking at it. It was all a matter of consent at that point. But the fact is that out in the culture as a whole, all kinds of bizarre things were happening, and in fact, it bothered me.
So, an example, what do you mean?
Well, I see. I didn't know for a long time whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. Eventually, I realized that the thing itself was neither good nor bad.
What, acid?
Yeah.
The acid culture?
Well, psychedelic itself was neither good nor bad, any more than a very sharp knife is good or bad, right?
Right.
You use a knife to
Depends on how you use
It's
it.
a
whittle sculpture. You can use it to trim your nails. You can use it to cut up your food, or you can use it to stab somebody. So the knife
Right.
itself is not the operative thing there. But it took me a long time because of the fact that it's so powerful and it changes consciousness so much.
So you thought it was in terms of a good thing at first?
I didn't know. And that was the reason why I cycled in and out of it for a long time. And then eventually I decided that it was just getting too weird to handle.
Well, then I would say that acid upset your moral construct.
So it made me think about it very seriously. Because of the fact that that things happened that weren't positive, that non-positive things were happening as well as positive ones. Things like the example about the girl that jumped out the window, and Charles Manson, and the fact that one person would take acid and become like Gandhi. Another person would take acid like some of the Hells Angels and say, oh man, I love to get in a fight with my acid. Why? Because everybody else is in slow motion. Right. Well, then Kesey said, hey, all this does is turn up your volume. The basic nature of the person is simply amplifying. All right. Well, in a social context, you can understand how those who feel responsible for the social matrix itself don't want something that may produce these kind of effects.
Once again, you're listening to an interview with Owsley Stanley, a.k.a. The Bear, an amazing character, as everybody who's called in has observed, with a lot of tremendous things to say. He passed away in a car accident. I think as everybody who's called in
effects.
Once again, you're listening to an interview with Owsley Stanley, a.k.a. The Bear, an amazing character, as everybody who's called in has observed, with a lot of tremendous things to say. He passed away in a car accident at the age of 76 on March 13th in Australia, which had been his adopted home for several years. This interview was originally recorded in January of 1991, and most of it appeared in my book, Conversations with the Dead, which is still available, mostly, I think, as an e-book. You can get it from Amazon. Anyway, let's continue with the interview.
You were asking me, basically, how you thought the Grateful Dead related to psychedelics. I don't know how it relates to psychedelics. All I know is that at one point, I joined up with a band that were pranksters, that were part of the scene, that was doing something that was right out on the edge. All I know is that at one point...
So anyway, let's continue with the interview.
You were... You were asking me, basically, how you thought the Grateful Dead related to psychedelics. I don't know how it relates to psychedelics. All I know is that at one point, I joined up with a band that were pranksters, that were part of the scene, that was doing something that was right out on the edge of consciousness, the edge of social, the edge of magic, the edge of music, that was very dynamic. A band composed of 5 guys that were amongst the smartest people I'd ever run across. To find that many really smart people that minds operated in the same function zone that mine did, that was absolutely carried on the most, tenuous and stratospheric conversations with nobody getting lost. That blew my mind, number one. It's unusual to find that kind of a bunch. I've worked for a lot of bands. I've been on the road. I've worked in halls where they come through a different band every day. In festival situations. I've worked in situations where I've had a lot of contact with a lot of musicians. But by and large, I find there's a great many really bright guys involved in the music scene.
Yeah,
But
really.
to find that many all in one group is truly unique.
That prankster scene didn't sustain that much longer.
Well, it was sort of like, if you set fire to a skyrocket, it's going to be brilliant as hell, but it don't go very far, and it don't last very long. It attracted so much social pressure on the individuals that had it not been for, Kesey getting busted and all these other things happening, and the intense amount of social and police pressure on it, that who knows how far where it would have gone. But as it was, it did its thing ultra spectacularly. But it was by necessity, it had to follow that old prankster saying, "Nothing lasts."
Right.
It lasted as long as it did, and then that was it. Even in the beginning, there was a great reluctance to get weird at regular shows. There was no reluctance to get weird at the acid test because they said, if they can't play, it doesn't matter. If they don't play well, it don't matter because nobody's paying to see them. It's not a matter of having an audience that you're performing for. It's just a big party. But they had to be at the party. They were an essential part of the party in their minds. That was an essential thing that had to be done every Saturday night, which I found not to my liking at first because, well, it was just a little too weird, a little too heavy, and it was hard to control, and it looked like too much exposure and made too much heat, and I don't know, all those things. I was not a real loud thing at that point, and I didn't want to be a loud thing or attract a lot of attention for any reason. And here was this theme that was so loud that if you put it on the moon, it would attract attention, right? So I was thinking that maybe, and here was this band of incredible musicians making this magic music, which I thought was more important to do that than to do this other crazy thing.
So you were sort of an impetus toward professionalism at that point?
I've always been that. In the old days, you went to a show, and there was no spotlights on the band. There was a light show.
All right, so I about got it together that this interview was from '91, but Osley recently died, I think. But anyway, fascinating character, good interview. This guy's putting a few interruptions in it, but I'm getting those cut out, and this will be up on my YouTube channel and on my Psychedelic Lectures album on Facebook shortly. As soon as I get it cut together. So, on this, I think I finally got the colors blocked in to my satisfaction in order to start detailing. I got some figures down below the Ferris wheel sort of meandering around. I've got the cement more defined, the structure of the Ferris wheel a bit more defined, a little street lamp that'll provide some nice ambient lighting. And so this one is about set up to take off. I'll get into the detail fairly intensely with this one, I think. It's a small painting, so it shouldn't be difficult really to do that. Make it very involved. That'll be fun. But that's it for the moment. Thank you for watching. That's Adam Sturch podcasting from the Mushroom Edge in Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Ferris wheel. Have a good night, Earth. And stay tuned for the Osley Stanley interview posting shortly.